in the pursuit of truth and common sense in an unbelievable world. You're listening to the Right Mind podcast with your host, Todd Schowalter.
Hello, everybody. I'm Todd Schowalter, and welcome to Right Mind. Today, my guest is Dave Robertson, who's the head of STL.PATRIOTS events, and he's here to talk to us about some conservative issues that he's dealing with in the St. Louis area, as well as others. How you doing, Dave?
Good. I'm doing well, Todd.
Now, you're in charge of a lot of different things as well as events. We spoke in the past about some of the things that you're working on. Obviously, you know, we live in a time where the left seems to be not only doing crazy things, but things that are actually controlling our lives at this point. Tell us about your group and what you're doing to defend us against that, and just what you have coming up.
Well, I should mention I'm not necessarily in charge of a lot of groups. I've been involved in a lot of groups.
Okay.
I am in charge of what I have is an email distribution list, and this was formed over a year ago, maybe a year and a half. And the purpose of it was to basically bring patriot groups together in the St. Louis area. What I saw was a lot of various disparate groups, and they weren't talking to each other. And each group, they're great groups, but they each had their own thing going. The idea with this distribution list was to try to connect all these groups together and to increase attendance at patriotic events. And so actually the list came out of a Freedom March that I did organize back in, what was it, March? It seems so long ago now.
Sure,
March of 2000, I think it was 21. We organized a Freedom March in the city of St. Louis in Forest Park. We got about 150 people out, and we marched through the Central West End, basically took a stand for freedom and against medical tyranny. And so that distribution list grew out of that event. And I have a number of the leaders of a number of patriotic groups in the St. Louis area on there, as well as individual patriots.
Okay. Now, as far as how many groups do you manage then, would you say, or would you distribute for?
Yeah, I distribute for, because I don't really, they're autonomous groups. So, I'm basically like a Paul Revere. I feel like I'm just letting them know about events. There's about 55 groups we have. Although I will say we do need to update the contact info for some of those groups. So I don't know. I'm hoping it's up to date. I'm sure some of it isn't, but we have about 55 different groups on there, as well as I'll just say over 300 individual patriots.
Okay, and I want to preface because it's the patriot groups. I mean, we're talking conservative patriot groups.
Yeah, conservative.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of the name I came up with. Basically, we'll look at the groups, and if they're standing for our constitutional rights, if they love our founding fathers, if they see the evil taking place right now, then they would be on the list. So I would say, yeah, that there's not any groups that would be on the call themselves liberal or leftist on there.
Sure, absolutely. Now, the thing that I'm having a hard time with that, I've mentioned on earlier shows, we keep hearing about, the silent majority. You better wait until the silent majority wakes up. Everybody's being so dang quiet, Dave. So I'm glad that you have these groups, but where in the heck are these people? I mean, you see all these radical protests all over the place when it comes to the liberals, but when are the conservatives going to stand up and be adults and say, hey, come on, knock it off. If you're going to be children, go home.
Amen to that. And I know you're not a quiet guy, Todd, as I remember when I met you at that overpass rally. And that's what I loved about you. Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that, I've been frustrated because the attendance at a lot of these events, it seems to be the same people. So there's a small group of dedicated people. And we think a lot about how do we get more people, because there are loads more conservatives out there. But how do we get them to these events? And as I've thought about it and discussed with others, I think there's a couple issues. And one of them is I think some of them are afraid to come out and take a stand. Mm-hmm. And I would just ask those people to think about, and it might be a little bit uncomfortable for them to do that. Maybe they might get some pushback from family or at work. I would ask them to think about, is it more uncomfortable now to take a stand and maybe lose a friend on Facebook, or have your family put in a jail 5 years from now, or, it's happened in history before, right? Or have your family shot in front of your house. So what's going to be more uncomfortable? I really hope people realize it's time to take a stand. And there's another thing I'm trying to think of too. I think a number of people, they don't realize how dire things are, and there's something in human nature that always procrastinates, and they justify to themselves, I know things are bad, but I think they'll get better if we just kind of keep on going the same old. If we keep on doing the same thing, somehow magically it'll just turn around, and it won't, because this is our government, this is of the people. It's up to us to rectify it and turn it away from the corrupt nature it's become recently.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head earlier too when you said you have a lot of people that are afraid. I mean, I read a column, and one of the things I hit upon last week was, dealing with the bully. I mean, typically the bully is the most self-loathing, insecure coward in the room, and that's really what we have with a lot of the radical left. And if we would just stand up and say, "Look, we're not going to take it," and it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Now, from your standpoint, I mean, I'm not going to speak too much about myself because you're the guest, but I mean, I've been censored, I've been silenced, I've been called every possible name you can think of, from race and white supremacy. Yeah, I mean, my gosh, I need like a manual just to keep straight all these name calling names I have. But the thing is, like you said, this is a little bit bigger than I think people realize. And if they're going to call you some kind of radical conspiracy nut, so be it. But as we saw with the COVID and everything else, we've turned out to be kind of right, haven't we, Dave?
We've been, not to brag, but we've literally been right at every single turn, and they are wrong. And this is the thing I want people to understand. I see it a lot in churches too, where I've stood up in my church and other churches and spoken, and people say, "Oh, don't talk politics. There's, we have people on both sides here," and so on. And what I want to say to people is, there's a right side and a wrong side. I'm sorry if that offends you, but we are right. We're not perfect people. We are flawed people, but what we're advocating for is fundamentally right. What they're advocating for is fundamentally wrong. And frankly, I'm going to use this word, it's satanic. It's satanically motivated. And when you see it's a spiritual battle and that there is a right side, then I think it's easier to stand up because, what do you have to lose? You're fighting for your fundamental beliefs.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And it's a spiritual battle. And Tucker Carlson was giving a speech to the Heritage Foundation a while back. I'm sure you saw that.
I saw that speech.
And he made a great point that this isn't a partisan issue. I mean, this is a spiritual issue. I mean, you're talking good against evil. And people say, "Oh, that's such a dramatic way of putting it." Yeah, well, it kind of is, but it is, okay? Because we are talking about a dire situation that in my lifetime I've never seen before. And as you mentioned, you got people that think, it'll get better eventually. And I don't think so. Have
you ever seen the government give up power?
No.
Go the other way?
Right, exactly. And with everything going on now, I mean, with all that's going on, the divisive measures that are being taken, it doesn't seem to be slowing anytime soon. Now, as far as these groups that you're dealing with, I mean, do you have some that are more, I guess active is not the word, but the one that are effective? I mean, do you have some groups that are making a bigger dent in what we're trying to do here?
I would say so. Again, I don't necessarily speak for the groups because I just try to notify them of events, but in that process, I've interacted with a number of the groups. So I can't speak for many of them because I haven't interacted with them, but other ones I have. This recent Anthony Fauci address to the WashU Medical School, I was involved with a number of groups there, and they are quite active. There are patriots in those groups. They're committed and they really want to make a difference. And I see those folks fairly regularly, but other groups I can't speak for as much. But I think there's a lot of people who are in various groups who are committed to their causes. And I see that more and more every day. Sometimes groups pop up where I'll get notifications from other groups I haven't heard of. Like there's one out in St. Charles County that recently I've gotten a lot of notifications about. Actually, just to mention, there's an event tonight at the St. Charles County Library where they've had an employee there dressing up in drag clothes, and there's going to be a big group going there. In fact, I'm hoping to go there myself. But groups are arising, ones I hadn't heard of, and they seem pretty committed too.
Yeah, when you look at, and you mentioned the whole drag clothes thing and everything, that's been around, decades, centuries, possibly.
true.
And and I've always been of the idea or whatnot that if you want to go do that, you just go and stay in your home, do whatever. If you want to have your own shows and go do your own thing and leave me alone. The problem I have that I don't know why it's such a radical thing to think that when you start bringing the stuff into our kids' classroom, and you're putting it in our face. That's when I have a problem with it. If you want to go do this on your own, go ahead. But it'd be like me being a carnivore showing up at a vegan banquet, and making hot dogs. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's ludicrous. It's ludicrous. Have you ever, in your experience, seen anything even relatively close to this?
Well, that's a good question, Todd, because I will tell you, I come out of academia. So as crazy as that sounds, and I was a professor for 13 years at a college. I was a teacher in a couple of high schools before that, taught at a high school last year. So I've kind of seen this coming because academia has kind of been the roots of this. But I haven't seen anything as full blown as this until I could tell you stories about the college I worked at, the changes that took place there. But I would say the last 6, 7, 8 years is where it got really intense. And I agree with you. If someone wants to dress up that way, that's their right to do that. But when you talk about polluting young minds, that's where people draw the line with exposing minors to this stuff. And this is an agenda. And I think it's a top-down agenda. There are moneyed power, very powerful moneyed groups that are pushing this transgender stuff. And it first came with homosexuality, normalizing homosexuality to kids. And now it's normalizing transgenderism, changing genders, and it will literally destroy this country, I believe.
Yeah, well, and it also seems to be almost, you mentioned from the top down, it seems to be that they all almost have like an I'm offended movement of the week. I mean, we had Black Lives Matter, so we had, we all had to be divisive about that. Now we've got the whole, we had the LGBTQ or whatever it's called, that now we're extending that to trans. I mean, God knows what the next one's going to be, but it just seems to be one divisive thing after the other. That they have a hell of a PR team or whoever's putting these things together.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, dude, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I agree with you in the PR team. In fact, I don't watch the news. I mean, I'm just going to say this. Anyone with a brain knows that the mainstream news is just a propaganda machine. I mean, they're not about reporting anymore. They're not about telling the truth. And I think whoever these people are, and I would argue some of them are like WEF, very wealthy individuals who have an agenda, Bill Gates, they have so much money and they control the mouthpieces of information, whether that be the media or whether it's used to be newspaper or like Facebook. They control Hollywood, so they control the music and the culture. So all these megaphones are blaring out, propagandizing these things. And if you're not aware of that, you will go right along with it. And I think many, many good people, decent people have been swept along with this stuff because they don't understand what's happened to the media. They don't understand these mouthpieces have become propaganda machines. And until people do understand that, you won't be able to handle it. Once you know that, like I know that, and many of my friends know that, all of them do, we know how to deal with it.
Yeah, and I think, we come from the same, vintage generation, so to speak.
Yeah.
That seem to be the only ones that can kind of get this, because I've seen with the older generations, they grew up always trusting the news. Okay, the news, if it's on the news, it's got to be true, So they they're still of that mentality. And you also have the younger generation that they're growing up and they're just fed this almost brainwash, so they don't know the difference. Where I think our generation is right there in the middle, kind of say, hey, wait, we remember when the news was objective and honest, but we also know when it's a big joke, and we kind of see behind that curtain. And I think that's one of and I think that's why we're trying to be silenced. At least, I don't know. I mean, I think I see that very openly. Like I said, I've been tried. People have tried. Certain groups have tried to shut me down several times.
Well, I would take that as a badge of honor. I mean, I've had the same thing. People in my church tried to shut me up. And the question I'd ask people is, why do you need to shut me up? Why is what I say, if your point is legitimate, then let's have a fair debate. Let's have a debate of the issues and ideas. Let's discuss this. When you see people shutting up other people or labeling them, that's a sure sign right off the bat that they're uncomfortable in what they believe. They don't know how to defend it.
Right. And it's almost like a herd mentality, don't you think? I mean,
groupthink.
Yeah, and they go along with stuff, and it's really kind of scary because we've talked to. You look at in Auschwitz. I mean, people, they would just, we're just getting on a train to be relocated. Yeah, and I'm like, wait a minute. And then if you think and you use common sense, you say, is this really all? This doesn't all add up, and that goes back to the COVID stuff. And something didn't pass the smell test, and it kind of the same with this.
It's the COVID stuff. I think woke up a lot of people. It definitely woke me up. I've always loved our country, but. I used to wonder, how did Nazi Germany happen? I did. You take a civilized culture, a Christian nation, gave us some of the greatest art, music, culture, and how did they end up putting 13 million people in ovens? Well, I got the answer to that in COVID. And so now my question is, why hasn't this happened more? I mean, I could not believe the extent to which people just blindly went along with it was lunacy. Like the COVID mandates were literal lunacy. And yet many people, I think, really bought into it and went along with it. I think there were many other people who knew it was lunacy, but they were cowards and they didn't stand up. And they thought, well, I don't want to lose a friend. I don't want to make people uncomfortable. And they went along with it. And really what it left, Todd, is it left a few of us like you and I, who I would say are lions, who won't go along with it, just to stand up for ourselves. And if more people had stood up, if even 20%, this whole thing would have just stopped. Because you can't, if you go in a store and you're not wearing a mask, if it's one of you out of 1,000 people, it's very easy for them to come down on you. If 300 people spontaneously said, we're not doing this, what can they do about it?
No, I agree. And I think, even if you take that to what's progressed from there, we finally have stuff with boycotts and things like that. I mean, now it's the big thing. Bud Light's being boycotted. I mean, that's fine and good, but it's kind of like spitting in the ocean. I mean, that's good, but I mean, and that is, I'm not dismissing that because, any step forward's, a good thing, but I'm still, I mean, in my situation, I was alienated by some family members. I was friends. I mean, called names and everything. And like you said, I mean, it was frightening because it was like, well, don't you just want to question this? I mean, if you get a shot, they're going to give you a bowling ball or something as a prize. I mean, that doesn't make sense. I mean, I've never heard of this. I mean, the thing that frightens me is how, as you mentioned, how easy it was to manipulate people, and I think it surprised the manipulators. I think they were laughing to the bank. I think they were like, "Oh my God, this was cool what we're doing. We never dreamed it would go this successfully. This many people would buy an absolute, moronic lie and go along with it." I think they were laughing to the bank. Yeah, I mean, you think something's on the horizon? I kind of do.
That's a good, I don't know whether one is. I can say that there's an agenda behind all of these things. And you mentioned the Bud Light issue. The thing, and I agree with what you said. So people have pushed back. Bud Light sales have dropped 30%. But the thing about it is, you have to sit. If you look at it more analytically at what's going on here, they can't be that stupid. I mean, they have to, I think what's happening is these moneyed interests who have an incredible amount of money are coming to companies and they're saying, well, you have to do DEI or ESG on a condition to get this money, or, they're forcing companies to do that. The CEOs have to know it's going to hit sales. So I don't think that bothers them because they have so much money. They're pushing an agenda and they're willing to sacrifice sales to push that agenda. That's what I think is really going on. So I'm not sure. I'm glad people are boycotting, but I'm not sure that's going to stop it because they don't care. They're doing things that are just utter nonsense from a business standpoint because their goal is not necessarily in the short term. They don't mind losing profits. They want to push an agenda.
No, I think you're dead on. I mean, I really do, because I've mentioned before, I've done work with AB on the comic side as far as illustrations and stuff. And I know just from working with a corporation like that the the checks that you have to go through to get anything through any committee is you go through this and this and this and this. You don't just come up with an idea. Let's put a trans on a can and boom, there it is on the shelf. I mean, that goes through every level of checks and balances you can imagine. And so there was a much bigger effort going into who finally did the final sign off on this than just this one marketing person that they're trying to pin it on.
I would ask people to think about this. There's two possibilities. Either these people are the biggest morons who ever ran a company, or this is intentional. Like, it's one or the other. And now maybe they're that out of touch with their clientele, but it seems like they're not. So I conclude this is intentional. It's part of a larger agenda, and perhaps the companies themselves didn't want to do it, but they were bribed, basically. As a lot of stuff with COVID, like these school districts. Well, when the government comes to you and they say, we'll give you, was it St. Louis City, like $160 million if you follow these mandates. I mean, they're basically bribing people to go along with their agenda.
Yeah, no, exactly. And you mentioned a couple of times now, it's much higher ups is where this all comes from. What do you think the end game is here? I mean, obviously they have a bigger master plan. What do you think the end result you think they're going for is going to be?
That's a great question, Todd. And I'm not sure I'm totally qualified to say that, but my understanding is that's a good question. You look at the WEF, I think it's control. I think it may be depopulation. I mean, a lot of these people talk about how we have to have a lot fewer people on the planet. So I think that may be one thing. I think another thing is these people in the WEF and other elites, they really believe that they should be the rulers of this planet, and they want to control the rest of the population and turn them into slaves. That's what they want to do. So I think that's the agenda. And this is all working towards that. If you listen to some of the things that like the WF says, and that guy, is it Noel Hariri or whatever? He's a terrifying guy to listen to, but he talks about, turning humans into machines. So that it's control. And to me, as a Christian, what this really boils down to is, it's a battle of Christ against Satan. I'm just going to say that. And, God created us in his image. He gave us everything we need. We don't need anything. We don't need to have chips implanted in us. We don't need to be monitored all the time. So I'm content with that. But they are godless atheists and socialist communists. And for them, they have to control others. And the key to immortality for them is not through Christ Jesus. It's through downloading your brain onto a computer. So I really think it's a spiritual, ultimately, it's a spiritual battle, and their motives are spiritually related too, or anti-Christian.
No, yeah, I agree. And I think, and I've said before, it gives me some peace knowing that, I said, I don't know how God picks sides and things. But being a follower of Jesus and myself, I mean, it's kind of nice to have the good guy on our side. Yeah. And that kind of, gives me some inner peace. It's down the road. I mean, we talked about possibly an end game type thing. You've got, the World Economic Forum you brought up, and the different things, you got these different people coming together. It reminds me almost of like some kind of goofy Marvel movie, like, it's with like these villains, but that's really what it's because. You've got John Kerry even mentioning, we feel like he mentioned he felt like he was like a superhero or something. I go, I know a lot of narcissistic people in my industry.
I do too.
I'm like, my God, could your heads get any bigger? I mean, typically when you get that big, the higher you go, the harder the fall. The harder the fall.
It's going to be a hard fall. I mean, if you read the Bible Psalms talks about this. One of the things I find that helps me out is humor, and I watch a lot of Jim Brewer, who's a comedian who came out very clear in his stand. And of course, he got rampaged in the mass media, and also JP Sears.
Great.
And Jim Brewer just makes fun of these guys. He makes fun of Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates and Zuckerberg. And he really, it's great humor because basically that's what it is. It's like a Marvel, movie. And these guys think they're like superheroes, and they're actually just villains. That they're just villains that need to be exterminated. I mean, I use that word metaphorically.
No, it is. It's like I relate it to Austin Powers, remember, and that may be some people may not remember Austin Powers, but with Dr. Evil and all that stuff. I mean, my God, it's like they're going by the script here. Wait, if you coming down, if say we got another situation coming up where we got our scheming and evil villains are putting together an evil plan as we speak, which I'm sure they are.
I'm sure they are.
Yeah. What now that we hopefully are a little bit more cerebral? How do you think we ought to prepare for that? I mean, I know, I mean, like you said, you and I'm not going along with it, and that if they're going to make us wear an eye patch or a mask or on our head, whatever, I'm not going to do it. Do you think there's things that we can do to be proactive to kind of prepare for some of this insanity that may ensue?
I do. One thing is, I think in a way, COVID was a gift because it woke a lot of us up, and it's given us some time to prepare. I mean, one thing I would say is just personal preparation. Now, this is something I've done a lot of. I have friends doing it. I don't think a lot of people are doing it, but self-sufficiency. I grow a lot of my own food. I am in a location that is fairly secure. So I would say in their personal lives, people can take steps not to be, the less dependent you are on outside sources for your income and food, the better. But I think we can, this was the purpose of this email distribution list, was to put Patriots together. And that's a good question. I don't know if I have a great answer to that, but I think personally we can prepare for it. Just understand, I think people need to inform themselves and understand who these powers are. And you're not going to hear it from the mainstream media. If you go through our educational system, you're never going to be exposed to it. So you have to do the digging yourself. This is a time when you're not going to survive by groupthink. You have to think it through for yourself, look at and draw your own conclusion. But I do think we have a lot, we're awake. Not many people are awake, and we're developing systems in place. So when the next thing comes, we'll be a lot more able to handle it. Because if you think about it too, when COVID went down, I was asleep myself. It took me a while to wake myself up. You mentioned earlier in the about trusting the government, trusting the news. It's a big transition when you grow up your entire life and you're brought up with this idea that the government has your best interest in mind, that they're being honest with you, to trust the government. It's a big transition to mentally come to the conclusion, wow, they're actually literally lying to us and trying to destroy our lives. But at least fortunately, many people have come to that conclusion, so they're actually aware of what's really happening. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, anything, if you look at the shining light, the silver lining, so to speak, in some of this, I think it did hopefully prepare those of us that do have some common sense and understand what logic is. Again, I've said before that, I think we guys like us and gals like us have gone from conspiracy theorists to visionaries. We're not conspiracy theorists. We're actually visionaries, because all this crap is actually happening. So that's the way I try to look at it.
I completely agree with that. I heard someone say there's no such things as conspiracy theories. There's only conspiracy facts. I'm not saying every conspiracy theory is true. I've certainly encountered some whacked out ones that aren't.
Oh yeah.
But almost most of the things we were saying, if not almost everything that we were shouting from the rooftops that people, made fun of us for and thought was ridiculous, almost every single thing has come true. So we can pat ourselves in the back for that. Again, we're not perfect people, but we had clear eyes. We're willing to stand up for what we believe. And you mentioned, God, we talked about God a bit. At least we have the guy who created the universe on our side. And that's a pretty big ally. And I think that can also give us confidence to go out and know that the creator of the universe is with us. And he's not with these other people, as much power as they might seem to have. Well,
no, I mean, you go back and read the stories of David, David and Goliath, the whole 9 yards. And and you are David, so there you go. Well, I tell you what, we've got 2 minutes to wrap things up here. What's the best way that people can get in touch with you? We'll put it up on the screen. If they have an organization, they can contact you. Are they interested in attending one of the events? What is the best way of doing that?
Yeah. So what I would say is, one thing is, if you want to get on the email list, then it's St. Louis Patriots events email distribution list. You could email me. I guess I'll just give out my personal email.
Well, we can do that. I mean, what we'll do, we'll put it up on the screen, and you can do it, here audio wise for those just listening.
Okay,
but
sure.
Yeah, go ahead. So
it's DWR at StanfordAlumni.org.
Okay. Stanford Alumni.
STANFORDALUMNI.org. We can put you in that list.
Perfect. We'll put that up on the screen, and we'll also put it in the notes for those listening along.
That would be great.
Well, Dave, I want to thank you so much. I hope you'll be a returning guest, because there's
I would love to, Todd. Please do have me back. This has been a great discussion, and I felt like we just scratched the surface of. We can go a lot deeper on many of these topics.
We did, and I think going back to what we spoke about at the very beginning. You got a lot of people out there that believe, and they're just afraid. I swear, just from personal experience, you confront the bully, he goes and cowers, and so it's enough of this hiding stuff. We got to.
Amen. I mean, people need to realize, like, you and I are what we're doing is we're out on the front line, and we're trying to get other people to take a stand. And, courage is contagious. Dr. Naputi says that quite a bit. So those of us being courageous, hopefully that will transfer to others. And if enough people do that, we can turn the tide. It's up to people hopefully we can be an inspiration for people to stand up. I think it is contagious. When you see someone standing up, willing to take, and I'll tell you, my own life, my career's took a hit. Other things have taken a hit, but that's the cost of freedom. There is a cost to it. And I think in the US, we've had things so good for so long, we've become addicted to, I don't have to risk anything for what I stand for. Well, now we're coming to a time where you do.
Yeah, well said. And on that final note, we will sign off and look forward to having you back next time. Okay.
Sounds good, Todd. I appreciate everything you're doing too. This program and all that. I know you're a patriot, and I appreciate your commitment.
Well, you got to stand. That's right. People say, well, if I do this, I may lose my job. Well, if we don't, you may lose your country, and you won't have a job anyway.
It won't matter if you have the best job. If you have no country to have that job in, it doesn't matter.
All right, my friend. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. And thank you for you too, buddy. And thank you for joining us, whether you've been watching or listening. I'm Todd Schowalter, and this is Right Mind. And remember, if you don't have a right mind, you don't have a mind at all. Till next time, bye-bye.
This has been the Right Mind Podcast with Todd Schowalter.